Welcome to the Row One Seat One podcast. I'm drinking an Ace Guava cider. Hold on. Oh, it's delicious. Um, it's been a fun few weeks here, and I have a podcast guest on who I wanted to have on since the inception of the show because he's one half of my favorite podcast, and his smooth baritone puts me to sleep every night, and that's a shoot. Um, it's Kris Zellner, host of Between the Sheets. I'm not joking. Every night I fall asleep to your show, Kris, and it is the most soothing comfort food I can imagine as I drift off to slumber. So thank you for your smooth. You're better than melatonin in some regards, but
Well, don't
no,
go to
for real.
sleep on the show.
No, I'll listen. I'll listen. Kind of put it on for an hour or two there. Um, I can put my brain in a place where, I'm learning about your vast reservoir of wrestling knowledge, whether it be from, the 80s, 90s up to modern day, things that I didn't know. I learn something new every time I tune into the show. And if you're really looking to learn about wrestling history or, something that, that happened at a certain place and time or, just, crazy stories in the world of wrestling, Between the Sheets, if you have not heard of it, absolute do not pass go, do not collect $200, must listen. The shows are quite long. They'll get you for a car ride, up to from Chattanooga to St. Louis or something like that. But it is, I refer to it as comfort food. It is just my favorite podcast, bar none. And I just first of all thank you for that, Kris, and thank you for coming on the show.
Oh man, we go way back, now, and you've chauffeured me around on various occasions throughout the greater Chattanooga area, and yeah, you're one of the best dudes in this little circle of the universe that we inhabit here in the wrestling online universe, and yeah, anytime, brother, that you want me to do something for you, I'll do it.
You've been the governor of the peach state of Georgia for at least the last 20 years, so it's literally the least I can do. There's
I
no
do
more
my
Georgia
part.
man.
I do my part. I root for all Georgia. I mean, that's my teams: Georgia, Atlanta Braves, Falcons. Hawks. I'm hometown. So
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I've wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
Yeah.
I live in the perfect spot because I'm halfway between Atlanta and halfway between Macon. The two top cities in the state. So what else
You
better?
grew up in the heart of
You've been there and you've
Crockett,
been in my
Barnett.
town. Yeah,
I
you've been
have.
here.
I've seen shows in your town. I met Cody Rhodes in your town, actually.
You sure did. Yes, we had a
Yeah.
great time
Yeah.
that night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was Crockett Country. Yeah, I mean, good lord, I went to, um, NWA, WCW, TV tapings galore because we were the hub. Because you got the Omni, Cobb County Civic Center up the road. You go down south, you got Main Coliseum. Go west, you got the Columbus Municipal Auditorium, and then you go east, and you got if you want to go to Augusta, you got Augusta up there. Savannah's down 3 hours away. There's Augusta,
And even
Savannah,
if you
both
don't live
right
in Georgia, I knew where all these places were, even as a kid growing up in Massachusetts, because
Gainesville, Georgia Mountain.
you're watching the 605, and we're in Augusta, and then we're in Columbus, and then we're in the Macon County, Macon Civic Center, and it's just like I didn't never been to these places, but I felt like they were home. And it because kids across the country and across the world were seeing what you were seeing at home, and
Yeah.
that had to be a blessing. And then I'm also extremely jealous of you because if you think you were a lucky kid, Kris was a lucky kid because Kris got the Pedicino block. Explain the
Yeah.
Pedicino block for those uninitiated.
All right. So I think it was April of 6/85, the same day as Crockett debuted on TBS. Joe Pedicino debuted a block on Channel 36, which at
Joe
that
Pedicino,
time,
who later founded Global,
yeah,
if you're looking for
which
context there, yeah.
which was at that time an independent station. He was their sales manager, and he was basically telling the owners of the station, "We need to capitalize on this wrestling boom. Wrestling's getting big." we need to devote a block of time on Saturday nights for wrestling after it goes off on TBS. And it's said, sure. I mean, wrestling has been on their station before and other stations. And they carved out at that time, it was a 3 hour block of wrestling starting at 8 o'clock. So it went from 8 to 11. That didn't last long. It got expanded to 6. so so you went from 8 to 2 in the morning. So in this heyday you had that for 6 hours after 2 hours of wrestling on TBS. Not to mention where I lived at that time, I was getting Macon channels as well. So I had wrestling from the Macon channels that was airing, then wrestling on the other Atlanta channels that were airing. Of course, wrestling on ESPN at the time as well, USA Network. So
I'm just,
I
I mean,
had
I thought I
every
was a
major
lucky kid, and then you had the pot of gold there, basically,
every major wrestling promotion television show aired in Atlanta just about at one point in time at the same time.
and you
I
had
mean, you had
Mid South
everything.
Memphis, like, and you had some
World
local, like,
class,
world class. You had some local stuff too, didn't you? Weren't
local
like, some
stuff.
of the Deep
Yeah, I
South and
mean,
some others were, yeah.
when the Assassins started Deep South, him and Pedicino were in concert together, and Deep South was on there. Then they had their falling out, and Pedicino went to with Jerry Blackwell when he started his promotion. So we had that promotion. Then Jody Hamilton, the Assassin, moved his TV to Channel 69 against Pedicino, competed against him for a year or so, and then Pedicino's he moved his block to Channel 69 for Channel 36. And yeah, I mean, it was just wrestling was part of my childhood in every way, and we had wrestling airing during the week too on different channels as well. So I mean, it was wrestling all the time. It was wrestling and sports and MTV.
I would all I got all week was, for up until, you know, basically the Monday nights started turning up basically. I would come home and I would make my parents to, like, break land speed records driving me home from basketball on Saturday mornings, biddy ball, or hot shot basketball as we called it, but basically you guys know it as biddy ball. And I would make them zip me home so I was home by 11 o'clock so I could watch Superstars. That's all we got. I mean, I think Wrestling Challenge was up there too, but, like, and then World Class was apparently on for a very short time, but I wasn't aware of it. So, Saturday mornings at 11 that was my wrestling time, and
Mhm.
I absorbed every bit of that. But I can't imagine that multiplied by 10, 12, whatever, with the amount of hours that you got. I thought I was a lucky kid because I got an hour of wrestling every week, and you're just like, yeah, I'm 6 p.m. to like 3 a.m. I'm just watching wrestling, as a grade schooler. I'm like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, that was Saturday nights for a long time. Other than you know, with watching whatever sports was on as well. And of course, I got my first VCR when I was 9 in '88, and which
The
eventually led
luckiest
to
man in the
having
world.
a second VCR not long after that. So I was able to dub tapes. So yeah, I mean, it's just been my life in a lot of ways.
And what it led to, and we'll delve into the conversation we're going to have today because I've always wanted to do one of these shows, listening to a lot of yours, and I said, I can probably do that, but I need an expert. That expert would be, Chris, who got to watch, 12 hours of wrestling a week, basically. No one, I would argue, including Meltzer, maybe only tied with your podcast co-host, and given that Cornette has used too much of his brain space to fill it with hate. I would argue that you are, if not one of the top three people as far as historical wrestling knowledge, walking the face of the earth, then you might be number one, honestly, because
Well,
the vast reserve.
I appreciate that respect, but yeah, there are people way more knowledgeable than me, but I definitely appreciate
You
that.
are my top one of 1%, basically. You are you are my Yoda as far as wrestling knowledge, and that's
Well,
that's
thank you.
why Between the Sheets speaks to me so much because you take a look at a week and do a 6 hour deep dive into everything that was happening in wrestling that week, and you don't you I mean, I'm sure you guys put your fair amount of research in, but a lot of what you guys talk about is just stuff that you have in this vast reserve of knowledge in your brains, and it is so admirable because I know, you know you know liberally, 50% of the stuff you guys are talking about, a lot of it is just discovering new things. So what we're gonna
Well,
do here,
that's what the show is about. That's what the
mhm,
show is about. When anything else is, we want people to learn. We want people to
mhm.
learn, and if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our job. I mean, I mean, there's stuff that I learn every week. Sometimes stuff I've forgotten. I'm getting older. Shit gets out of my head sometimes. But I mean, it's that's the thing about this show is we go back in time and look at time in wrestling, whether it's from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, even now in the 2010s. We look back at it, in a historical way, looking back at as a retrospective, looking at the coverage from the newsletters, seeing how that was done, and changing narratives and everything. I mean, yeah, I mean that's the main thing too, as far as our show is trying to make you know the narratives what they are instead of what they were. Sometimes they are the same, but
You guys
we
do a lot
change.
of that on the Patreon show too. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, between the sheets, it's a wise investment. And I think pretty much since the jump, a Patreon subscriber to you guys because I love to support you. And also, like the even deeper dives you do on those Patreon shows are incredible, absolutely incredible. And you guys are, you'll take, 3, 4, 5, 6 months and just completely absorb everything about a particular topic, whether it be, ECW or, some of the promotions that have fallen past world. The other night I was listening to one of your world class Patreon shows. It's just like, man, I'm learning so much right now.
Well, thank you.
So, given we're going somewhere with this, I promise. Given your vast reserve of wrestling knowledge, you are one of the very exalted human beings who has a Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame ballot. And some of my
Yep.
favorite podcasts I listen to and I learn the most from are when you or someone else will take their ballot and say, these are the people I'm voting for. Let's do a little bit of a dive into who this person is. I've learned about more wrestlers that I didn't necessarily see from these shows. So if I can, simulate that even, in a small way, I'd really love to. And obviously, there's no one better I could think of than you in this regard. So you have been a Observer Hall of Fame voter for how long?
Over 10 years now.
Incredible.
I don't
That's awesome.
remember the exact year, but over 10. Yeah.
You've contributed to the newsletter as well. I know
A
you did a
long
lot
time.
of coverage. Yeah, very very long time. Because you did a lot of coverage from Mexico and
Yep.
um yeah, you were one of the Dave's suppliers,
Yeah.
if to say.
Rob Bahari was
Mhm.
was basically doing a lot of that, and he decided to step away. And he basically told me that he wanted me to pretty much take his spot in doing that, and that's what I did. And I did it for 15 years because I mean I
And
had to quit. No more than that, about 16, 17 years, and I had to give it up because it was just too much to do lucha stuff every day and trying to do the podcast. It was killing me.
well, with
I did
social media,
and work a 40-hour week job.
which to you is actually 60. Um,
Mentally,
but
yes.
with social media, um, it has to be a lot harder to cover wrestling nowadays than it was even 10 years ago too, because if you were doing that job, giving a larger retrospective on what's happening in Mexico, you could, used to be able to find it all in one or two places, and now you had to follow 200 different Twitter feeds and Lucha
Oh,
Facebook. You've told me about Lucha Facebook.
God Almighty! Yeah, I mean that's what they use a lot more than anything else is Facebook,
Mhm.
and that's an experience. I don't know what it's like now because it's been years since I've got off of it, but that was something else, man. Oh my God! And it's just different because I used to check out their newspapers, their online
Yep.
newspapers, and they cover things differently in Mexico than we do here.
In which way?
It as far as like, let's just say you have some type of murder, violent murders or car
Hmm.
crashes and stuff. I mean, you get to see. I mean, you're going to see the gruesome photos.
Oof.
There's nothing there. Yeah, it's just like when somebody be killed, you'll see their, like if they got shot in the head, you're gonna see their head with a
That would
bullet
mess
in
me
it.
up.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely different, man. I mean that's just the way they. That's just the culture and how they cover stuff like that. So you got that, and just all the other crap that was going on. But that was just part of the thing, trying to just find the information that I need to find. But yeah, I mean I thoroughly enjoyed doing it, but it just got to be a thing where it was just too much, and I had to give something up,
Hmm.
and that was the one. I wasn't giving up the podcast. So
I was the same way. I worked for RotoWire for about 10 years covering stuff, and was lucky enough to contribute to ESPN and Yahoo and all that sort of stuff before I worked at the newspaper. And covering stuff for me was a lot easier pre-Twitter than post-Twitter. Because I just look at the newspapers of the local teams I was covering, write up a few reports, et cetera, and everything was more centrally located. I think the death of newspapers and the spread of social media, which I think are two in the same, basically. One grew because the other died, um, makes it harder to accumulate factual information.
well, there's so much misinformation going
Yeah,
around, just in
exactly.
general, anyway. So it's harder to do a lot of things to get the actual truth sometimes.
Yeah,
And there's always a race to be first, and that too. And sometimes people try to be in first. They report stuff that's not all the way accurate. But that's the way we are now. And now AI is starting to grow and grow, and that's a
that's
whole nother
terrifying.
thing. Yeah, it is bad.
So we're circling back. I'm sorry. So you're an Observer Hall of Fame voter. Been voting about 10 years. Like I said, wealth of knowledge, going on there. And you really put a lot of thought and research into your ballot. You take it very seriously.
Absolutely.
It's,
Absolutely.
I mean,
I mean,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's a wrestling Hall of Fame from a newsletter, yeah, but it's there's just something about it that whether and a lot of it is the discourse, about it, but it's just I don't know, it just feels like our way of doing something that's similar to the Baseball Hall of Fame or the Professional Football Hall of Fame or stuff like that. It's our version of that.
yeah, because I'd argue it's without question the most important wrestling focused Hall of Fame because WWE Hall of Fame obviously is just like, hey, you got a pulse, you used to work for us, you're in. Um, I do respect the Thez Tragos Hall of Fame, but that's a lot of that also is based on availability, except for when Al Getz won an award. That was completely legit. Um, but there's not really many other wrestling, merit based, expansive halls of fame other than wrestling, Observer Hall of Fame. So I've always been a big admirer, and I've been a subscriber since '06. Um, those were always my favorite issues, and those were always, where I'd learned the most. So, and again, with your show as well, you know, in tandem with that, that's really built up my historical knowledge. So, got some interesting candidates existing on the ballot from the past this year, and a couple of new candidates as well. So, let's dive in here a little bit. Now, there's multiple. Actually, one thing. Go over the because you have that in front of you there. What are the things that Dave makes you consider while voting for a candidate?
Um, well, the criteria is
Hmm.
first off to be eligible.
Hmm.
You have to be at least 35 years old and completed 10 years since your debut as a full time performer, or someone who's been a full time pro wrestler for at least 15 years. Um, that's it's all. That's always a thing that's kind of bugged me about the criteria, and I talk about this all the time. Is I think the age is too low, um,
I'd agree.
especially these days. I think it probably needs to be bumped up. Um, And I mean, I'll flat out, I'll say, and I've said this before, I will not vote for an active wrestler on my ballot. As far as an active wrestler who is still basically
In the
performing
peak
at
of
a
their
top
career, yeah.
level, I voted for Ultimo Guerrero uh, because he wasn't at the main event anymore. But not to say that there aren't modern wrestlers that deserve to go in. I mean, I understand and I get that, but that's just me. I can't do it. I can't bring myself to doing that for somebody that's still working in their peak years to go in the
Well, the
Hall of Fame.
story's not written yet. I'm on the same line as you when I see some of these modern, candidates going, because I'm just like, you know, their story's only halfway written. That full career breadth is not completed yet, and I don't know how the ebbs and flows and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure a lot of people who voted for active performers probably regret it years later, because that the career took a turn they didn't expect it to take or something like that. And it's just I don't necessarily love the criteria either. 35 I think is so young. 10 years is, I mean, we got people now going, still on, active, American national TV who've been going 20, 30 years, and they're still writing their story.
Yeah, but I mean, I get it. I mean, John Cena.
Mm.
I get. I mean, people like John Cena, no doubt, and
Yeah.
Cody Rhodes on the ballot this year, and he's pretty much a no doubter, and he's probably gonna be maybe the exception to the rule.
They're
When
slam
you get
dunks,
that
but
stretch.
yeah. I mean, Danielson was the same way, right? Danielson,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was a
But
matter of when, yeah.
but but yeah, that's that. Also, you got, I mean, longevity. It's something that's part
Mhm.
of it because Dave kind of emphasized that you shouldn't be voting on somebody just because they had a hot 2 or 3 year run. You know, unless they're so significant as a trendsetter, which you know that's people use that for Goldberg. For his
Yeah, I was about
candidacy.
to say Goldberg. Yeah, yeah.
Um, right now he's changed. The last year he started to change in the categories how they're done, and now there's maximum candidates you have to vote for now in categories, and so there's that. Um, it's broken down better than when it was, but but yeah, I mean, you have to get in, you got to get 6% or more.
Yeah.
If you, I mean, if you're
It's
under
the Baseball
60,
Hall of Fame number two. Yeah.
and that's what a lot of this is broke down. The breakdown for modern historical performance is 30 years ago. So now it's 1994. So if the last year
Kind
the
of
person
close.
was last, yeah, I know. If the last year the person was a headliner or key figure in the industry was probably 1994, they are in the historical class. So and then if you receive 10 to 59.9% of the ballot, you're back on the next year. You fall below 10%, you're dropped from the ballot. You
Mhm.
can always return, but it's basically
Yeah.
2 years. You got a 2 year window before you come back. So,
And a
and
lot of
this year,
these people come back when there's like new things, you know,
or
drummed
they
up in the
die.
research about them, or they die, or there's like,
Yeah.
there's some sort of movement, or some historian will make an argument for them or something like that. So it's very much a grassroots sort of thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And, and then you got people that if they're on the ballot since 2008, and he basically gives them like 15, 16 years or whatever, following the baseball thing, they'll drop off the ballot. And this year there's only two, and if they don't get 50% of the vote or get elected, they're off. And this Johnny Saint and the original Huracan Ramirez. So there are only two this time. So if they don't get 50% or get elected, they're gone from the ballot.
And we'll
So
we'll read through the names as we go through here. The ballot can get pretty bloated, especially in certain categories. And what ends up
it's
happening
definitely
in a
it's
lot of those
definitely a lot more.
cases,
So
the log
yeah,
jam.
it's bigger. There was a problem for years when Lucha was just log jam like hell, and now it's kind of it kind of dropped down, but now it's starting to grow a little bit more again. So yeah, I mean that happens. I mean it, with certain sections, if the voters that you know specify or specialize, excuse me, in a certain section, if they're not in league with each other and vote kind of all the same, then that definitely will hurt that section. as far as
Oh
getting
yeah.
people in.
And there's always people advocating for different wrestlers and new articles coming up and new research coming to light and things like that. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting world. It's a very interesting world. Let's start with the historical performers. I'm just going to read through the names, and then let's pick out a couple highlights that you thought of, or maybe that I might want to just quick hitters basically, because there's I mean more than 100 some odd names on this whole ballot here. So let's just pick out some ones that stick out to you, and I'll pick out some ones that stick out to me. How's that sound?
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So historical performers. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say historical performers.
Mhm,
Ole Anderson's the first name on the
mhm.
list. Um,
Interesting
Ole
case.
Anderson. Ole Anderson was one of the you know best tag team wrestlers of his generation with his brother Gene. But his candidacy, also should entail his booking history. I mean, he
Yeah.
was one of the most successful bookers of his generation. Did he have issues as booker at times? Yeah, but they all do. But I mean, he was the booker of record. When Georgia had most of their biggest success. In the late '70s and early '80s, and that goes into your candidacy when you're somebody
The
like
whole the
that.
whole thing. Yeah.
So I mean, he was a main event guy in those major territories as well. And I just have a bias towards Ole Anderson because I grew up with Ole Anderson being this local legend. So that always plays a role in it too. People can say that stuff like that doesn't factor into how they vote, but they're lying themselves in ways.
Oh yeah.
They're gonna have their biases no matter what. So Ole's a guy who will always stand out to me, and I will vote for him unless I'm forced not to. For basically,
Yeah. Let us know who you are voting for among the unless you don't want to reveal your ballot. But yeah, I mean that's um we got Oldie, we got Afa and Sika, the Wild Samoans, who both passed in the last a pretty recent time.
yeah, they both.
And
I
then
mean, they
obviously
they,
they're
they both
yeah
die within a month of each other,
yeah.
basically.
Which is wild. And then obviously their lineage. I mean, their lineage is basically half the WE roster. Bullet Bob Armstrong, who I know Crispy Lettuce will be voting for. Tully and Arn with JJ Dillon. Their run there. The British Bulldogs. June Byers, Wild Bill Curry, Junkyard Dog, who I definitely want to talk about, Cowboy Bob Ellis, Pampero Firpo, who a lot of people might not know, but actually Macho Man kind of cribbed his act from him, right?
Heavily
A
influenced,
lot of
yes,
it.
heavily
Yeah.
influenced.
Black Gorman and Great Goliath, Mongolian Stomper Archie Gouldy, the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, Sputnik Monroe, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, Johnny Rougeau, the Iron Sheik, Steamboat and Youngblood. This was the tag team they had in the early '80s. Mad Dog and Butcher Bashan, and then the trio of Kevin Kerry and David Von Erich. I'll kick off. What sounds interesting to you on this list?
Well, one thing I was going to bring up with how things are. Yes, Dave has in the last couple of years has instituted this thing with tag teams where you got people that's already in the Hall of Fame, like a
Mhm.
Dusty, like a Brett, like Steamboat, but they're on it in their tag teams that they were famous for. So they're getting in twice. Like Jeff Briscoe got in
Mhm.
last year, and a lot of that
Yeah,
sometimes is to get the tag team in, but also get the person in
partner.
that they're their partner.
Hmm.
So there's that. All right, so often Sika's new because of their death.
Hmm.
I mean, they have a candidacy. I mean, they were one of the top tag teams of the early '80s. I mean,
Oh,
there's
they
that.
were a mainstay in early New York territory, as
Yeah, I
the
mean
kids today call it.
they were big deals up there. Plus, they were on Georgia television, Mid South. I mean, they had a great run. Bob Armstrong, like Ole, I have a bias for. Bob
Oh, I'm
was
pro Bob Armstrong all the way. Yeah.
I mean, Bob was again, and then with Bob, it wasn't just about the work. I mean, he was one of the bookers for Continental, Southeastern all those years, and was very successful in that job. Um, you know, Successful wrestler. So Bob's just a guy that I'm always going to vouch for. Tully and Arn,
I have an issue with that because it was only a
I
couple
don't
year
like
run. Yeah.
1 year,
Mhm. Yeah.
1 year. I mean, it's basically trying to get Arn until the end, but I don't like it. I don't like that and paired with JJ. I mean, they were there for 1 year together, so I don't like it.
Yeah. I'm an
Bulldogs.
Arn guy, though. I think Arn, of his own merits, should probably be much more strongly considered than he is.
Well, Arn and Tully both have better cases as solo guys than they do as a
Yeah.
tag
Yeah.
team. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Bulldogs.
Very
Um,
influential.
very influential. Absolutely. I mean, we're a very successful team in WF and Japan too. Jew Byers, one of the top women's wrestlers of the 50s and 60s. Um, major name in that time period. Traveled all over. Um, she's somebody I voted for as well. And
Certified
definitely,
draw. I mean, an attraction during those
yeah,
times.
definitely would look at it again. So absolutely. Wild Bull Curry. I mean, Texas wrestling. A lot of it is Wild Bull Curry. I mean, he went in there in the 50s and just became a megastar in Texas and just became like this legend there. But and he traveled all over and was a big time draw in many places. Um, definitely
Yeah,
somebody that a lot of
Texas
people
was.
don't know about, but just
Mhm.
a major figure in wrestling for decades.
Junkyard Dog. Let's take a minute
Yeah.
here on
Oh
JYD
yes. Yes.
because this is the one that mystifies me the most, to be honest. How he's not in
And I've done
because
a lot of podcast audio on JYD about this too.
mm,
A lot.
he's one. His impact on New Orleans for those years cannot be understated. Not just for, I mean, look at the numbers. The level of draw he was. I would argue that, that you can count on two hands the amount of wrestlers who maybe were as much of a draw in one area as he was. I mean, the list is short, but also the racial implications. I mean, I think we really need to look at the full context of things
It's
here.
culture. I
You
mean,
know,
that's the thing. When I did,
cultural, yeah.
yeah, I did a thing with Voice of Wrestling a few years ago, one of their Hall of Fame shows, and JYD was the main thing I was talking about, and JYD was a cultural phenomenon, and his influence extended well beyond professional wrestling. And it's something like that should get somebody in the Hall of Fame even more than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I mean he transcended wrestling. Not to mention he was an amazing draw,
Hmm.
national draw. Um, I mean, he went to WWF and became the number two guy behind Hogan for a good year and a half as a babyface. He replaced Slaughter in that spot with Slaughter left. I mean, he became the number two babyface in the company, and
I
yeah,
think he's
just
one
one
of
of the
those
most
cases where the latter years color a lot of
yes,
people's perceptions of
absolutely.
him. Because I think that, like, if he had just stopped his career and he just hung up the boots in, what, 87, 88, I mean, he'd be a complete slam dunk candidate. But I think the latter, for lack of a better term, sins, really, people consider that more than the first 10 years, where he was, a walking god, basically,
Yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
just it's sad, but he's the guy that it's a no brainer for me that he
yeah,
should be in the Hall
no,
of Fame. I mean, just
100%.
for various reasons.
And
Um, Cowboy Bob Ellis, that I know that's somebody that our dear friend Dylan Hales has a lot of respect for and thinks he should be in. And Cowboy was one of the best baby faces of his era. Um, he's a guy, though, where with me in particular, he's somebody that if I didn't have a cap on the maximum amount of people I could vote in the category, that hurts. Because there are other
well,
candidates on my list that I have over him, but I think he should be in. I absolutely think he should be in.
this is the learning thing because I've never seen Cowboy Bob Ellis. I've just heard tell of him. What was his impact? Tell me about Cowboy Bob Ellis.
I mean, he was. he was one of the first guys to really do the cowboy gimmick on a national scale. I mean, the bulldog is, basically his move that he made famous in a lot of ways. Um, he just, again, like I said, just an amazing bayface former, big time driver where he went, and again, just a guy that time going away and not enough footage of him around
Hmm.
definitely hurts people like him, and their candidacy on these ballots with a younger generation. And like you said, I mean,
Pampero
you get
Firpo, yeah.
again. I mean, Pampero Firpo, same thing. Pampero Firpo. I mean, he retired in 1980, so he retired, and by that point in time, he wasn't nearly the same guy. But he retired in
Hmm.
1980. As wrestling is really starting to get big on television,
He missed the
and
wave.
he missed the wave. Yeah. So that's part of it. I mean, he's a guy that was a major star, in different places. The Bay Area is a legend. So I mean, he has a candidacy as well, in that
I don't
regard.
know anything about Black Gorman and Great Goliath. Who were they?
Gorman and Goliath. I mean, one of the top tag teams of
Hmm.
all time. Gorman and Goliath, they traveled everywhere. I mean, of course, they were at their peak in California and Texas, but
Hmm.
they worked for George Championship Wrestling in the '70s, and they were the tag champions and top tag team in the promotion, on TBS before it was Superstation, it was WTCG. But and they worked everywhere and were a big deal. But again, their prime was before television
For TV.
was a huge deal nationwide. And again, it's stuff that people have to. These are the type of candidates that you have to do research on, and
Yeah.
these
A lot
days,
of your show has made me look into these people because just like, oh, tell me about Gorman and Goliath. What are they all about? What was their impact? Like that sort of stuff. And I hope these podcasts and these ballots and the issues and things like that really encourage people to, you know, this name seems interesting. Learning because there's never been easier to do research. It's
no,
never been easier to try to find, try to find out information about, historical figure or something like that. And it's just click a couple buttons and you'll learn about Gorman and Goliath. You learn about, Cowboy Bob Ellis. You learn about Pampero Firpo, and it just broadens your wrestling base.
yeah, I mean, but again, some people just don't want to learn, and I get that. If you're in your comfort zone and you just want to watch a newer style pro wrestling, I get that. But I'm always one of these. I appreciate the classics, and I want to
Hmm.
learn and learn more about older things. I've done that with sports, music, cinema, everything. I appreciate older forms, and so a lot of times that stuff's better than what's out there now, And in fact, these days, most of the time, but but I'm getting old. I can say that. I'm
Yeah,
not.
we're
I'm
also
not.
dating ourselves here too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
Um,
I'm not a young guy anymore. But I mean, it's just that the research on these types of people, people just don't want to do anymore. Young people, you
um,
know.
the Mongolian Stomper.
Oh goodness.
Bret Hart has talked about how he was basically the most impactful wrestler in Calgary and through a lot of the rest of the North America as well. Um, what? Tell me about how there's a good case for the Mongolian Stomper Archie Goldie.
I mean, as far as Stampede Wrestling goes, like I mean, Brett's right. He's one of the biggest stars ever in the promotion, but he's more known, in our area for being one of the major stars in the southeastern United States, whether it be in Georgia, whether it be working Knoxville, Memphis, in Florida. I mean, he was in Texas. He was a major deal everywhere he went, and a top draw. Was he the greatest wrestler? No, but he didn't need to be. He didn't need to be
Hmm.
because his gimmick was so strong that he didn't have to be that. But yeah, he's a guy again, got a great case, definite great case to get in. It's in a stacked category. That's the thing about this historical category. It is stacked.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh yeah.
just tough to figure out. It's tough to figure out 7 people, to vote for.
Yeah. Because these are all legends. Hart Foundation. That's a team that I grew up on. Bret Hart, Jim Neidhart. I had a ballot, I don't necessarily know if I would have voted for. I mean, obviously, because Brett's in on his own, I think
Brett's
that
in.
Brett's impact as a singles is much deeper than his impact, the impact the tag team made.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm,
And nothing against Anvil, but
mhm.
yeah, I mean, I can't vote for him because Brett's already in. You know.
Yeah, I agree. Um, a lot of people listening to the podcast do not know the historical significance of Sputnik Monroe.
Oh my God.
He, yeah, he broke the color barrier in Memphis. It did. I mean, tell that story because you know that, you did a lot of research on this.
I mean,
Talk about the significance.
in Memphis at the Ellis Auditorium before Mid South Coliseum in the '60s and very early '70s, um, black fans sat in the balcony, separate from the white fans. That was just a thing that happened in the South. Um, Segregation. I mean, it was a bad deal. But and Sputnik Monroe was a very popular wrestler among the black community in Memphis, and he made it a point that he wanted them, you know, to be down low and everything, be with the regular fans and not be put up in the balcony.
Mhm.
And he had formed a tag team at the time with Norval Austin, a white man and a black man teaming up. And
This
what
was
they did was
groundbreaking at the time.
very, very, different. Sputnik Monroe had dyed blonde hair. He put a black streak in his hair. Norval Austin had black hair. He put a blonde streak in his hair. So that was the thing that they did. And he changed Memphis wrestling forever by forcing the integration of the Ellis Auditorium. And I mean, he was a guy who had a tremendous track record as a draw in different places. But like Junkyard Dog, his cultural
Yeah.
significance should get him into the Hall of Fame more than anything else he did in his career. He was just a major cultural personality,
A
in
civil
wrestling.
rights figure, honestly, if you think, I mean, in our
Absolutely.
little world, he was a civil rights
Yeah,
figure. Yeah, he's
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. He's one that I will always vote for as long as he's on the
mhm.
ballot.
Dusty Rhodes, Nick Murdoch, the Texas Outlaws. How long were they a tag team? Because obviously they both. See, that's another one where like they were an impactful tag team. And I know in Australia they really had a significant impact. In the late '60s in Australia, but I, I, they're more of their own singles merits. And I recognize, my when I think of them, I immediately think of their singles work as opposed to their work as a tag team. And I mean, you've done a lot of
Five
research on
years.
this. Yeah,
About
5 years.
5
Yeah,
years.
exactly. Yeah,
The
yeah,
first part of the '70s,
yeah,
because Dusty goes to Florida on his own in '74,
yeah.
'73, late '73, '74, and that's when everything changes. But they
Yeah,
but they
Tax
had
Punk.
their moments. Yeah, yeah, they had their moments when they would get back together. But yeah, that was their peak, and it went to Australia. I mean, the AWA, they were a big
Mhm.
deal there. They were a big deal for the Sheik in Detroit. They were a big deal in Texas for Fritz. Um, yeah, they were one of the top tag teams in toward Japan, one of the top tag teams in the business, and just a
Tell the
legendary,
story.
influential tag team.
Tell the story of how they got kicked out of Australia because it's one of my favorite stories in wrestling history.
um, I mean, they were rowdy. Just to give you a gist of that before we get to the Australia thing. I mean, they were known for having their jackass, stay in their apartment in
A
Minnesota.
literal donkey. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, so the stuff they did. So Jim Barnett was running Australia, and he brought him in. So Jim Barnett, you know,
Very proper.
very proper,
Hmm.
very fashionable, my boy. Um, he had a dress code for his
Hmm.
guys. He wanted them to wear slacks, dress shirts, ties, and jackets in public. He didn't want them
Yeah, when they're out in the
looking,
wild. Yeah.
yeah, wearing t-shirts and jeans and stuff. But Dusty and Dick, he let them get by because of their gimmicks. So he let them wear nice jeans and cowboy boots, but he wanted them to wear cowboy neckties and stuff.
Yeah,
And what they would do is they would have them in their pocket, and whenever Jim was around, they put them on.
the bolo
Um,
ties. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
So they had just some stories there. I mean, there was a bar in one of the towns where they hung out at. They would take safety pins and squeeze them on their heads and hang their socks off of them. Uh, there was a guy who had an aquarium in town. One of the towns in Murdoch would get in the aquarium and swim with the sharks and stingrays. They wore they loved wearing cutoff shirts and short jean shorts.
Short booty shorts. Yeah, that's the
Booty
story I've
shorts.
heard. Is that they basically got kicked out of Australia for wearing Daisy Dukes.
Yeah, so they were at King's Cross, and Gary Hart tells a story about how he was eating in a restaurant with his wife. He saw them out there in their cutoff tees and their Daisy Dukes, and was like screaming at them, "If Barnett sees you, he's gonna send your ass home. You can't walk out looking like this. You got to clean up." And they wouldn't do it, so they were back there again. They were out there eating ice cream and everything, and Barnett showed up, and Barnett sent them home. You know, and Gary Hart said, "I sent them home. They have to learn their lesson." I mean, they defied a lot of the rules, and they were just rebellious at the time, and just influential in so many different ways. A great tag team, but again, I just can't vote for them
Yeah, they're
because
of their own
of
merit.
who it is. Yeah.
I heard a lot of people talking about the candidacy of Johnny Rougeau. In
Yes.
Montreal, incredibly influential. Obviously, his sons, became wrestlers. The whole family basically were wrestlers. Um, a less problematic Fritz von Erich. um,
Well, actually,
what do
no.
you know
Well,
about Johnny Rougeau?
Johnny's the uncle.
Oh, he's the uncle. I'm
John,
sorry. I thghought he was the,
yeah,
the father. I'm sorry.
no,
I got him.
Jock Senior was
Jock
the
Senior. Okay,
father
I got
of
to cross that.
with
Yeah.
the other.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's understandable.
Hmm.
But Johnny
But
Rougeau was, if you want to make a comparison to like the Von Erichs, what you did, he would be like Carrie.
okay.
He was the Carrie of the family. He was the most popular. He was the biggest star, um, major draw, major figure in Montreal in the 60s and 70s. Um, Joe Lanza on the Voice of Wrestling podcast is one that really like hit me to Johnny Rougeau and doing research on him. And yeah, when I started doing research on him, I was like, wow, that this guy. I mean, he definitely should be in the Hall of Fame because it's just the stuff he did in his career, man. Just being, I mean, constantly selling out the Montreal Forum, which is a 20,000 seat building.
20,000. Yeah. Hmm.
I mean, just
Let's say, what would Montreal at its height comparable to? Would it be comparable to Dallas?
oh, more than that.
Really? Okay.
I mean, basically like Garden. It'd be like New York. We're in
Interesting.
the
Okay.
Garden once a month. It's run the Forum once a month or whatever, and just drawing these huge gates. It'd be like Bruno in its own way. I mean, that's what it was. And yeah, just again, a guy who we don't have video of really, but it's the research of doing on these people. Like, wow, this guy just should be in the Hall of Fame.
Iron Sheik. Fuck the Hulk Hogan always and forever. I don't think he's necessarily a Hall of Famer. Steamboat and Youngblood. Again, a really popular tag team for a short period of time there.
they,
Especially in the Carolinas.
they revolutionized babyface tag team wrestling in the South. Um, they just did. I mean, they were such a major act in the Carolinas for a time span that I would have no problem with them being in the Hall of Fame at all as a tag team. Absolutely not. Steamboat, of course, in on his own merit, but I would have no issues with Steamboat and Youngblood just because of, I mean, they were as big of a deal in that territory as anybody else was, and they drew some massive houses in their 4-year run off and on they did there. So they definitely have a candidacy for sure.
Mad Dog and Butcher Bashan. Is Mad Dog in?
Mad Dog's definitely in. Um,
Okay. Yep.
a major team in wrestling in the '60s and '70s. I mean, Butcher Vachon, not the greatest worker in the world, but I mean, he was a pivotal part of the whole thing. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're voting for tag teams, they're definitely somebody to consider. Absolutely.
And then the last one on this historical list, and come to light a little bit since the Iron Claw movie came out, but I mean, people who follow Dallas wrestling know how pivotal they were. As a trio, Kevin, Kerry, and David Von Erich.
I don't like it as a trio. I
You
understand
don't?
why.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting.
I understand why, but as a trio, proper trio, they only had a year and a half. That was a year.
That's
That
a
was a
hell of a
hell of
year
a
and a
year
half,
and a
though.
half. Hell of a
Yeah.
year and a half. But again, not enough time as a trio to be in. Kerry should be on his own volition. I mean, Kerry should be in solo. Um, David, you can't. I mean, he died too young.
Yeah,
It's
he was
just
he was on his
a matter
way.
of fact.
He was very much on his way. Yeah.
Kevin, Kevin, I love Kevin as a performer,
Hmm.
but he just didn't have what Kerry had to be a Hall of Famer. Kerry should be in the Hall of Fame on his own, no doubt.
Kevin was a solid 280 hitter.
Kevin, I mean, if you like compared to like the Von Erichs to the Jacksons, Kevin's
Mhm.
Jermaine. And Jermaine, hey, and I like Jermaine. Jermaine Jackson has some
You're like,
really good.
Jermaine's awesome.
Jermaine
Yeah,
Jackson
but
has some really good music as a solo artist in the early
he was
'80s,
he was a
but he
Michael,
wasn't
and he was a
Michael.
Michael. Yeah, exactly.
He wasn't Michael.
All right, let's run through some of these modern performers. I think we get some more
All
arguments
right.
here, and then
Okay.
we'll kind of touch on Japan and Mexico and Europe and the non wrestlers. But the two areas I want to grab in this podcast were the historical and the modern. Um,
Yes.
Asuka slash Kana. I've been a fan since the minute I saw her. I think I think she's always been incredible. I think that the impact she's had on Joshi has been immeasurable. What are your thoughts there?
Um, Still active, but I mean,
Hmm.
you know,
Winding down a little bit.
winding down. Um, Definitely a hell of a case for her. I will probably vote for her eventually. Will it be this year? I don't
Hmm.
know, but definitely
Sure.
somebody that I think has a proper candidacy for sure. That's very serious.
Now, I might sort of lump some of these together here because we, we we're starting to see some of the wrestlers who the prime of their careers was in Ring of Honor during the 2000s and 2010s. And I have a soft spot for a lot of those wrestlers because that was what got me back personally into wrestling. I have a personal connection to this. So people like the Briscoes, Samoa Joe, people like that, um, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, those were part of my rebirth of wrestling. But where do you stand on Ring of Honor and its historical significance?
It fueled a lot of what has made modern professional wrestling what it is, in many
Hmm.
ways. I mean, let's just go down the list. I mean, so Mark and Jay Briscoe.
Yeah.
Um, I voted for them last year, and I will probably vote for them again this year. I mean, yeah, is Mark still active? Yeah, but
Hmm.
they're the team, and of course Jay is unfortunately passed away.
Yeah.
So what? But again, I mean, one of the most influential and great tag teams of their generation.
Yeah.
So they're
I'd argue
definitely,
the best tag team of the last 20 years. Yeah.
and there's a lot of great tag teams on that list.
Hmm.
And I got no problem with people saying that. Young Bucks. I mean,
They're very influential. I don't
Young,
necessarily
Young
like
Bucks.
it, but
I have. I mean, there was a time there where it depended on the day. I could tell you the Young Bucks was the best tag team in wrestling. I mean, when the Young Bucks and the Usos were at their peak, and
Hmm.
Usos are on the ballot too. When they were at their peak, and even like the New Day, and the Wyatts, and
Hmm.
that era where all these teams were doing it. I mean, you could just whatever day it was, you could say they were the best tag team in wrestling. Young Bucks extremely majorly influential. I mean,
Hmm.
good lord, they helped start All Elite Wrestling.
Yeah.
Um, that's another part of their candidacy as well. Um, have they done themselves any favors in the last couple years? Maybe not, but they they are very very serious. I mean, and I think that they should be in the Hall of Fame. Will I vote for them myself? Maybe not, but I think they should be in the Hall of Fame. Before it's said and done.
I think
Samoa,
AEW is going to be their legacy. I think that the ebbs and flows of AEW are going to be intrinsically tied to the Young Bucks and
yeah.
their candidacy. And if AEW is faltering, people are going to be like, "Oh, it's all on the Bucks." And if AEW is flourishing, "Oh, it's the Bucks." I think that they're the torchbearers for better or for worse of that promotion.
Well, yeah, because they're still there. I
Yeah. Well,
mean,
they
there's
also
there.
helped found it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they have
Cody's
found. They're
gone.
also still there,
Omega's been off the. Like it's
and he's
them and
already
their
in. He's
their
already in the Hall of Fame.
yeah,
So
yeah, their buddy Tony. Yeah. So, um, Edge absolutely fucking not.
no, no. I mean, Edge is yeah. I mean, I get why
Yeah.
people are fans of Edge, and Edge has a very big influential factor behind him
Mhm.
in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but yeah, he's just not. No, no.
He's a no for me. It's a no for me, dog.
Yeah,
Goldberg, I would argue no for the reasons we talked about earlier. Just too
just not
short a
long enough.
span of impact. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, too short.
Samoa Joe. Again, we talked about Ring of Honor a little bit. I mean, this is a guy who now, I mean, the WE thing didn't go necessarily as I or many people would have hoped, but I mean, he was the guy in Ring of Honor for a very long time, and he's been, at or near the top in AEW for the last few years. I think he's a really interesting case.
Joe is one of those guys where he's not a full time wrestler anymore.
Hmm.
And he's active, but that right there plays into me. Um, Joe, I think Joe's AEW run in the last year cemented his case to me as a Hall of Famer.
I
He
agree.
was already, pretty much on the border for me, but I think that last run of AEW as champion cemented the case. I will vote for Samoa Joe this year.
The Hardys, again, the influence. I mean, they, for better or for worse, that there's a whole generation of wrestlers who lived and died by Hardy Boys wrestling and try to pattern their style after them.
They they're somebody who I definitely can see them being in. Um, Again, will I vote for them personally? Maybe not, but I could see them being in, and I wouldn't have a problem because I mean, where's independent wrestling without the Hardys in a lot of ways?
Mhm.
Because Omega
There was
was
a modern tag team style, Yeah.
yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, where is Omega? I mean, Omega being what it was and them becoming what they were was pivotal in independent wrestling growing in the late '90s and early 2000s. So, influence alone should get them in.
I'm going to lump these two together. Becky Lynch and John Moxley. I think most of their story is still left to be told. Would you agree?
Moxley, yes.
Okay.
Becky Lynch, I
There
think
was a
Becky.
year there. There was a
I think, well,
solid year where she was, yeah.
but but here's the thing with Becky. I think Becky's now to the point where she's becoming more of a part-time talent. Um, Her influence I definitely can see myself voting for Becky Lynch this year, for being in the Hall of Fame. I think that she has a very strong case of being in.
I, I think
Absolutely.
I think that year might have been the most impactful year a woman wrestler's ever had. I mean, that's a hell of
Yeah,
a argument. Yeah.
and you know what? And again, her NXT run, I mean, it wasn't long, but that NXT run and her, really getting in there and making a huge difference in NXT for that time period in 2023.
Give him back.
That,
Yep.
yeah, I mean that's a big major impact on a lot of talent. You know, yeah. So I definitely have her in my crosshairs for ballot. Absolutely.
Yeah, Moxley, I think we still got a lot to tell. Hall and
Yeah, yeah.
Nash,
Um, as
influence impact again. Yeah.
as a team, and they're as a team here. No, no.
Mhm.
Um, both have stronger candidacies on their own, but they're not. Yeah, they're just not Hall of Fame either as singles. But I just can't vote for them.
If this is a Hall of Fame for the coolest guys in wrestling, they would both be first ballot. But it is not because they were both really cool when I was 14 years old.
Oh, you got
Paul
yes.
Orndorff, that's one a lot of people go back and forth on.
Paul Orndorff is somebody that I will vote for. Major star. His feud with Hogan '86 is was one of the biggest money making feuds in wrestling
I'd
history.
say that was Hogan's most profitable feud until Savage, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It didn't get talked about enough because Hogan Andre just completely overshadowed it months
Hmm.
later. I mean, but and it's sad, but um, one of the best when in his peak, one of the best wrestlers in the world. Um, just fantastic performer, top star everywhere he went. Yeah, he's somebody I will vote for. Absolutely, no problem.
Randy Orton, I've always been against the Randy Orton candidacy because there's obviously, there's more. Well, he's clearly winding down now. He's been, a, main eventer in WWE for 2 decades now. I think I'm more apt to consider a guy like Randy Orton now because the story's pretty much been told.
Randy Orton is an interesting case. Randy Orton is somebody he's got that whole thing of he's the wrestler's wrestler. I mean, the wrestlers adore Randy Orton as
Yeah.
far as what he does. He's over with the wrestlers more than he's over with the
Hmm.
fans. It's fine, but he's
I agree
really
with
over
that.
with the fans. But he's more over as his legacy is no pun intended. Is more over with the wrestlers than with the fans. The fans love Randy, of course, but the thing you can point out to Randy Orton's been a main event guy for 2 decades basically
Yeah.
now. He's never been a huge draw.
Sure. Yeah.
He's never been the guy who was the guy. He's been
Well,
champion all these times, but he's never been the guy who was the guy. It was
let me play
Cena.
devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I mean, he was always number two, number three, number four guy. And I'd argue that in the last 20 years, the name on the marquee has been WWE, and that's what sold tickets as opposed
Well,
to
yeah,
individual names.
yeah, and you're right, Absolutely, it's the name, the promotion that draws, but he's not been a ratings draw either. That's what I'm saying.
Hmm.
He's not been a big ratings draw. Um, I love Randy Orton. I've always been a fan of Randy Orton, but he's just a guy. I don't know. It's hard to come up with a comparison for him. Um, it really is. It really is hard to come up with somebody to compare to him. But I just can't vote for him. I just can't.
Kevin
Not
Owens, I
right
think
now.
there's still a lot. Yeah, that's. I don't know if I'd vote for him necessarily either if I had a ballot, but I think his case. If you're gonna start getting in this glut of modern guys, I think he's towards the top of that list. So, um, Kevin Owens, I think there's still a lot to be told there. Would you agree? He's active, still very active.
Yeah, I mean he's about to get into a
Mhm.
big feud with Cody Rhodes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean Kevin's a guy again influence on
Hmm.
the new generation, being one of the top indie names in the time where the indies was you know at its nadir. Um, definitely has a candidacy for sure. Absolutely,
We'll finish with Punk. Roman Reigns, I think he's a no-brainer.
he's going to get in.
Yeah.
Well,
He's
I
headlined
think
8 WrestleManias. I don't know what else you want me to do.
and he should be in. I'm not going to vote for him, but he should be in.
Okay.
He should be. I mean, he's like Cena. I mean, I never voted for John Cena, but do I think Josh should be in Hall of Fame? Absolutely, no brainer. But I'd rather use my vote on other people. because
Yeah.
I know that this guy should be in, and he's going to get in.
Cody Rhodes. If you told me 7, 8 years ago that Cody Rhodes would probably be a slam dunk for the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, I'd call you crazy. Now he's probably a slam dunk for the Wrestling Observer
He,
Hall of Fame. I think that's incredible.
and Cody's very much active. But you know
Hmm.
what? Where's wrestling today without Cody Rhodes in a lot of ways? Because I mean, he was the driving force of AEW with Tony Khan. Yeah, the Bucks are there too, but he's the driving force. Um,
Most
his
profitable part of Ring of Honor. Honestly, I mean
yeah, yeah. I
that was the
mean,
best Ring of Honor ever did.
he was a major part of Ring of Honor success in that time period. I mean, look at him coming to WWE, and how he transformed WWE in his own way. And there's a lot left to tell with Cody, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Um, I'm voting for him. He deserves to be
I
in the Hall of
think
Fame.
that Cena is the only person I can think of in the last, God, what, 30 years who understands the role of champion as much as Cody Rhodes. He knows the part. He willingly plays the part. He does all the intangibles and tangibles in some case, but I no one is as befitting of a WWE champion. I would say even maybe more than Roman. In fact, I would agree more than Roman as far as
Well,
just like
Cody's the ultimate
understanding the role.
company guy. Yeah, the
Yeah,
ultimate company guy. And he's gonna probably. And you know what? I mean, who knows? He may take over for Paul Levesque one day, or be up there with Paul Levesque as far as in that type of position in the company. I mean,
no, he's starting
he
his own political party in 2036, and we're all going to vote for him. That's what's going to happen. He'll be
I mean,
president someday.
he's just yeah. Where is wrestling today without Cody? I mean,
Hmm.
absolutely.
I agree. Trish Stratus.
I like Trish.
I
I
do
think
too.
I think her comebacks have been fun, and she's done stuff. But I just can't vote for her.
Fair. I would tend to agree. That might cause a little heat in some corners, but I just the generation that came after her, I can see the influence she had on that generation. But I think that generation, the modern generation of women's wrestlers, is leaps and bounds. Just especially in the ring, supersedes that generation she was in. Um,
And it's not her fault. That's the
no,
thing.
not at
It's
all.
not
No, no.
it's not her
She was
generation's
making
fault
it what
because
she had. Yeah,
they weren't given the chance like
she
the
absolutely
women.
maximized everything she was given, but um, I think she was born 10 years too early. Honestly,
In a lot of
she
ways, yeah.
would. Yeah, Steiner brothers again. If it was the coolest guys, wrestling Hall of Fame, I think they'd be first ballot, especially Scott. But what do you think? Honestly, I mean, like that.
I voted for
They,
them.
did you? Okay, I love that they were my favorite fucking tag team in the world, and I have a hard time seeing past things I like as opposed to things with significance.
Well, you got to take.
But
I mean,
God, they
the
were
thing with the
cool, man.
Steiners,
They were so
the thing with the
cool.
Steiners, the thing with the Steiners is you got to take their whole package into consideration. I mean,
Hmm.
Japan, they were
Yeah,
one of the most dominant tag teams in Japan in the early '90s. And that's a huge thing to add to their candidacy. I mean, they were the best tag team in WCW, the best tag team in New Japan probably in their time, and best tag team in WF.
fair.
Um,
Yeah,
I mean, they had a tremendous run, and their influence and their
yeah.
just everything about their package. I mean, and again, I have a bias naturally,
Well, I do
so
too, and I have trouble seeing what is my bias and what is historically significant. So I appreciate you
yeah,
clearing
I
me
mean,
up.
I have a bias on them, so I'm going to vote for them probably again this year. I voted for them last year. I mean, it's what it is. But but other than my bias, I do think they have a tremendous case of being in as a tag team.
The Usos. That's
Too much, too
interesting.
early.
Interesting.
I mean, Jay is on his own doing his thing. Jimmy's just not come back. There's meat on that bone. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So
My favorite wrestler of all time, Sid Udy. God bless that man. R.I.P. Just what a great man. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer necessarily, but again, just the coolest dude who ever lived.
Sid Vicious is one of my all-time favorites. I mean, good lord. I mean, I've done podcasts on Sid.
Mhm.
Just one of my favorites. A true gem. Not a Hall of Famer.
Bray Wyatt.
God love him.
Mm,
God love him, but just not a Hall of
yeah,
Famer.
I love him. No, he's so cool. Bray Wyatt. This might start some arguments, I'm sure, because the people who are loyal to Bray Wyatt are fiercely loyal to Bray Wyatt.
Yeah, but I mean, again, he had a run. Um, I think this the problem with Bray is he just died too young.
Hmm.
It
Agreed.
just it was not enough to warrant being. If he would have lived and was able to have a redemption run as the Fiend, and got back to that Bray Wyatt aura in a way, maybe. But
Yeah.
no, I just can't do it.
Um, I think Sami Zayn will be in eventually. I don't know if now is that time. I mean, he's challenging for the title. He's still
Well,
getting
Sammy,
meat
I
on that
mean,
bone.
yeah, meat on the bone, but Sammy is
Mhm.
again like Owens. I mean, Owens and
Mhm.
Sammy are tied together in so many ways,
Yes.
and their candidates are tied together so many ways. I mean, reply whatever you think about Owens to Sammy, and that's what it is. Yeah, I mean, he'll get in eventually. He's going to be in. It's just maybe not now.
Japan, Mexico, and Australia. We're running a little long in the tooth in this show, but let's touch on a couple names in those candidate in those categories that people may want to look more into.
Um, I mean, guys I voted for on this list, I think Shima should be in.
Mhm.
Um,
Influence. Yeah.
one of the best guys influence. I mean, just a legend. Yoshika Fujiwara should have been in years ago. It's a shame he's not in. I mean, trained some of the biggest names in Japan. I mean, a major influence there. Top star, top draw. I mean, he has a much. His candidacy extends far more than what he did inside the wrestling ring. He was
Mhm.
great there too. Hayabusa again to me should be in. Yeah, he was paralyzed, but his run in
It wasn't a
FMW
long run, but it was very impactful. Yeah.
very impactful, very influential as well. Was the face of the company after Onita retired. Just a fantastic performer. I mean, those are three guys that I think for sure should be in there. Um, Tenkoji, Kojima Tenzan,
Mhm.
great tag team of their era. Um, Antonio Inoki, Seiichi Sakuguchi. I mean, I can't vote for them as a team because Inoki being Inoki and Gooch is a hell of a guy too, but I just can't vote for him as a team. Kento Miyahara, too new for me.
Mhm.
Zack Sabre Jr. again, too new for me. Mako Satomura, I mean, she's retiring. Next year's her
Yeah, I
last
would
year.
probably strongly consider Mako Satomura for just, again
Yeah,
influence. Just
yeah,
for
yeah,
the
yeah,
impact she had.
yeah. She's definitely right now. I mean, Dave has raised this from 3 to 4, the Japan
Hmm.
category. So you got more wiggle room now. In my fourth spot, she's in contention for sure. Tiger Jeet Singh, um, major star in Japan, just
Hmm.
terrible in ring wrestling, just terrible.
Well, his son
Shingo,
was worse, but.
oh god, Shingo Takagi. I mean,
A
as a
lot more to tell
worker,
there.
as a worker, he's probably.
Mhm.
I mean, he should be. I mean, he should be in
Oh
one of the
yeah,
best
yeah.
workers of the generation. But still, I can't bring myself because he's still too active. Yoshiro Takayama is a guy who I'm definitely considering.
Love Takayama. Just all in on Yoshihiro Takayama. Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
so
he
cool.
he was such a major figure in wrestling in the 2000s because of MMA in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
You
he was
know,
real. That was the thing. He was real.
the
If you're gonna
Don
take a
Fry.
star from that Inoki Azumera, that's the guy.
I mean, the Don Fry fight
Oh, my
made
favorite.
him an amazing star
Yeah.
in pro wrestling.
Mexico.
So, um, Mexico's is again it is very very tough because it's a loaded.
Who
Um,
are you voting for?
Sakura Chicana should be in.
Mhm.
Was in some of the biggest hair matches of his era. A big time draw all across the country. Los Hermanos Dinamitas y Encaras Mascara Año 2000, Universo 2000. They should be in. Um,
Hmm.
all three guys on their own had success, but and as a team and were great. They should be in. Dave's also extended this one from 3 to 4 as well. I mean, those two are two I voted for. La Parca AAA is somebody who I will definitely vote for now that I haven't voted for
Okay.
in the past because of the restrictions and people that were on the ballot. So those are guys that I'm definitely. He's definitely one I'm looking at. Um, he put Grand Hamada in the Mexico category, which is very interesting because Hamada's biggest
It's a mix of
success,
Japan and Mexico, right?
well,
It was
his
both.
biggest success is really Mexico as a wrestler. I mean, he was a major deal in UWA. I mean, he trained in Japan. I mean, he did a lot of work there, but he's somebody that should be in. I just don't know. I don't know about him in this category as being that category. I don't know. It's tough for me. It's like Darrell Dixon's is somebody who definitely should be looked at. A major figure in Mexico in the '60s and '70s, moved from America to Mexico and just
I don't think I
became
know
a
Darrell Dixon. Yeah.
Darrell Dixon. I mean, he you know a large black man, in the world of lucha, and basically one of the reasons why I left USA was the racism,
Mm.
and he became a major star in Mexico and moved to Mexico and still around today. Um, just a fantastic name and legend in Mexico. He's definitely somebody who I will consider as a vote for a vote. El Dandy's on the list. Everybody knows El Dandy. El Dandy, a tremendous wrestler.
Yeah.
Never,
Early
never,
'90s. Yeah.
yeah, never the top guy, but a tremendous wrestler who has some amazing matches. Definitely worth considering. Psycho Clown was a big time draw in AAA in the late 2000s and
Yeah. Yeah.
2010s. Um, he's got a case. There's other people that I would vote for over him.
Mm.
But that's just the key candidates in that category in my mind.
Are you voting rest of the world category or no?
I do.
Okay.
And that one took a hit because a lot of
Hmm.
people fell off the ballot. Adrian Street is somebody who I voted for in the past.
Okay.
Adrian Street is a legend in my mind. A fantastic wrestler, very influential. Um, doesn't get his due. Just tremendous. Um, Johnny Saint, is on the verge of falling off the ballot. I mean, his influence is insane. I mean,
Oh
CM
yeah.
Punk, Chris
That
Hero. I mean,
style can be. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, just his influence alone probably could get him in some cases. Spiros Arion's got a big case from he was a major deal in Australia. George Gordienko was blackballed in this country and
Hmm.
only worked Canada and other in
That was
European
due to
countries.
the Red Scare, right, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, pretty much,
Yeah,
yeah.
McCarthyism. Yeah. Hmm.
hmm Otto Vance as a promoter, was one of the best promoters in
People who
wrestling.
came through. Yeah, came through Austria
So
there. Yeah.
he's got a great candidacy. So yeah, yeah, it's got three maximums. So I'll definitely add a couple more new names to the list.
Which non wrestlers you going to vote for? We'll just drop in a couple there.
All right, Dave Brown.
Hmm.
I mean, it's no brainer to me.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
Lance Russell is arguably the greatest announcer of pro wrestling history, and the fact that his partner is also somebody who you consider as one of the greatest announcers in wrestling history
Yeah.
is something else. I mean, Dave Brown was fantastic, and the longevity being as important in Memphis as he still is. I mean, Dave Brown's definitely somebody who
He's a
I
pillar of the
will
community. Yeah.
absolutely. Um, Bobby Davis, the guy who made wrestling managing what it is today. He
Yeah.
was
He was the original manager, right? Yeah.
Nick Triple Buddy Rogers' manager. Um, Influence and just his historical significance. Get him in there.
Bobby Keenan said he was primarily influenced by him, right?
Absolutely. James Melby. I mean, as far as wrestling magazines and stuff like that, and and being like a godfather to wrestling newsletters in a way with how he embraced that fan club culture, he definitely is somebody who should be in. Ted Turner's a no brainer.
Hmm. Oh
No
yeah. I
brainer.
mean, just,
Where's wrestling without Ted Turner having it on his network? In all these generations. Roy Welch, the father of Buddy Fuller, of course, grandfather of Ron and Robert Fuller.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Talk about a sign of, like, yeah, exactly.
Ron Fuller's podcast is what really turned me on to the historical significance of Roy Welch. Roy Welch is one of the best promoters in wrestling history. He was so huge in getting wrestling into places in the early 20th century, man, in the early half of the 20th century. Just historical significance through the roof. Grand Wizard, um, one of the greatest managers of all time, whether it be as
One of the
Abdullah
wise
Farouk.
men. Yeah.
Yeah, being Abdullah Farouk as a Sheik's manager, before, and then being the Grand Wizard working for Vince in the WWF at
And,
Senior.
and he passed away just before the wave. I think that.
83. Yep.
Yeah. Hmm.
So those are guys that I voted for. I have a spot open, and looking at who's on here. I mean, Bob Caudle, the voice
What do you think?
of wrestling in the
Tony
Carolinas.
Schiavone is one that sticks out to me because he's going on, almost 40 years now of being, one of the top announcers, and I think he's really rediscovered himself with AEW.
AEW
Yeah.
has really helped his case. Absolutely. He's definitely somebody who I will have more consideration for. Kevin Sullivan's on this list, which is interesting.
Hmm.
I mean,
Well,
Kevin Sullivan
recent
being on
past. Yeah.
this list. Kevin Sullivan being on this list. I mean, Dave's got him on here for his
Interesting.
booking. For his booking, and he was the booker of note when WCW was at their biggest success. You know, um, interesting. Interesting that he's on this
There's
list.
one name.
What?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What are you
Go
say?
ahead. There's one name I skipped over in this whole list. Is there anyone else in this list you want to talk about before I talk about the big elephant in the room?
Koichi Yoshizawa is somebody who, as far as a Japanese presence in wrestling history, is definitely somebody who has a definite candidacy. Um, I mean, he was the Japanese conduit for all like the newsletters. He was the number one Japanese wrestling historian, basically. You know, and just a huge figure when it came to spreading the word of Japanese professional wrestling to the Westerners.
Well,
And I
in
would
a
probably,
similar
I
vein,
probably would
Joe Higuchi. Joe
Joe.
Higuchi was basically the liaison, right?
Yes, Joe Gucci was the
Hmm.
referee, and of all Japan, he was the liaison. I mean, he was a very important figure in wrestling history in that way, and
I mean, he
definitely
was
somebody who has
pivotal
a
in all the gaijin coming over there that
yeah.
wouldn't have been as successful without Joe Higuchi facilitating that. I think that's fascinating.
hmm Yeah, he's got a definite
All right, the
candidacy for sure.
the one elephant left in the room, before we close up here, um, CM Punk. I know, right? That's my thought too.
Well, I'm not.
Ah,
I mean, another thing about Punk is Punk. Punk is a Hall of Famer,
mhm.
but he's still got shit going on. And this WWE Redemption run, he's been hurt for so much of it that
Smiling babyface CM Punk. Yeah.
yeah, I just want to see more. I mean, the Hell in a Cell match with Drew McIntyre was amazing, but I want to see what else is left on that bone. I want to see what happens when he gets into the mix for the big feuds, the big titles. So he's a Hall of Famer, but I'm not going to vote for him, but he's a Hall of Famer
Do you think
for
he's
many
helped
reasons.
or harmed by his AW run?
What have they done since he left?
That's the argument. I mean,
I
you
mean,
can sort
they're
of pinpoint that moment, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean that's a pivotal moment in their trajectory in a lot of ways, as far as their TV ratings and their live event business. I mean, he's his own worst enemy in many ways.
Oh,
Is
has
it,
always been, always has been. Yeah.
he's just a tough candidate for various reasons, but I think he has enough on his track record to be a Hall of Fame guy. So
Well, Chris, this has been a lot of fun. This has been a dream of mine. So I appreciate to just go through this and learn about wrestlers. And like we talked about earlier, if there's anyone on this list who you want to delve more into, there's never been a better time in history to just take a deep dive on a Spiros Arion or a Dominic DeNucci or a Bob Caudle or a Johnny Rougeau or any of these people who may have predated your time in wrestling, but made such a humongous impact in their place and time in the world.
absolutely yes.
Now, we mentioned before, you are the host of Between the Sheets and a bunch of kind of spin-offs. I'm loving this center stage spin-off you're doing with the wonderful Rob Naylor. Love that man. And um, just the whole Between the Sheets. I guess what family of podcasts you want to call it?
Yeah, I mean, so Center Stage Chronicles is
Center Stage Chronicle. Hmm.
yeah, Rob Naylor and our good buddy Charles Loss for Pro
Hmm.
Wrestling Only, who does wrestling playlists now. An amazing online newsletter, but with videos and shit, and just he does tremendous work in that, and doing chronological looks at wrestling. And yeah, we have a ton of fun on that show as we look at WCW, NWA, WCW before Nitro. I mean, that is our thing. Everybody's done podcasts in the Nitro era. It's talked about
Yeah,
like hell, but we're doing the true era of NWA / WCW. And
my wheelhouse right there. Yeah.
I mean, right now we're in the fall of 1989. Our next show will be covering the run to Halloween Havoc. So yeah, so really fun stuff. And like I said, we go in chronological order. So we've done the bulk of 1989 so far, and yeah, just real fun. The show is a monthly show, so we just come out one a month. Between the Sheets is every week. Dave Bixpan and myself, and we're
For
almost at
10 years.
four.
You're about 10 years, right?
Yeah, this is our 10th year,
Mhm.
so we're. I think the next show will be 480. So yeah, we've been doing this for a long time now, and we're still going strong. So yeah, we're getting into some more newer ground now in newer years because we kind of have to. We've done a lot of the old years, so we're doing that. But yeah, it's still a fun show to do, and as long as it stays fun, then we'll keep on doing it. And then the Patreon show from that patreon.com/ between the sheets, where we do a monthly show there. And right now we're doing our look at Vince Russo's departure from WF in 1999 and going into all the stuff that went on there and why he left out of there. And we've done the Patreon show for 8 full years now. We're in our
Yeah.
ninth year of the Patreon, and you can access the audio to that for $5 a month.
Great
So
reservoir there too. Yeah. I'll play roulette and just pick a Patreon show and learn something that I didn't know. And that's what I appreciate about you and Bix is that you're educators. And I cannot thank you enough for the impact you've had on people like myself who just want to learn about this amazing world of professional wrestling. And you are top of my list personally of just people who taught me so much. So thank you,
and,
Chris. I
yeah,
cannot thank you enough
I
for
appreciate that.
that.
I appreciate that. And we have like a set of shows available for our Patreon shows for free, so people can check that out. Whether it be the Titan Gate series that we did a couple years ago, and other things, we have free shows available for you guys to check out to decide if you want to put the money down to be part of the Patreon. So patreon.com/ between the sheets, $5 a month gets you access to all that. And yeah, I mean that's the main stuff I do. I mean, Exile on Bad Street is my personal podcast that I'll break out on occasion. And just
A
the
lot of fun.
time. Yep, just the time is not what it was for me to do those on a regular basis. But I've done a ton of shows on that as well. So everything is on our pretty much everything is on the
Yeah,
our Red Circle feed,
that's how I
redcircle.com
listen.
slash. So everything's there except for some of the early stuff, which Bix hopefully will get on there soon. But yeah, so everybody check that out, man. I mean, it's a labor of love, total labor of
Well, Chris,
love.
I appreciate it. I appreciate your knowledge. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate you just being such a figure in my life personally, in the lives of a lot of people over the last decade plus. So thank you for coming on the show, Chris.
Thank you,
Love you to
thank
death,
you. Pleasure.
man. And we'll be back in a couple weeks. Thanks so much for listening.